This is part 10 of the Craftsman 6-inch joiner rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 9, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be cleaning some parts, polishing some parts, rewiring and modifying the power panel, and then assembling the power panel. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. In part 9, we removed the handle from the hand wheel, so now we are going to basically remove most of the chrome and then polish up the hand wheel. So I'm putting it inside my chuck for my metal lathe, and I'm trying to get it as square as I can to the chuck using this piece of bar stock, because my 1, 2, 3 blocks are too big. So we'll see how this works. It doesn't have to be perfect. It'll be easier to sand if we've got it relatively lined up. So yeah, that's good enough. All right, so we're going to be dry sanding and then wet sanding and then polishing this hand wheel. So just like we did on the columns, and we're going to follow that same process for most of the stuff that we're going to be doing on the lathe here. So I'm starting off with 60 grit sandpaper. And basically I'm just using a rubber piece of foam sanding block. It'll help it conform to the angles better. So I'm using 60 grit and then 80 grit and then 120, I think 180 and then 220. So I didn't like how that turned out so far, so I went back and we went ahead and hit it with 40 grit and then 60 and then 80, and then worked our way all the way up again, all the way up to 220 with the dry sanding, and spent a little bit more time with the dry sanding to remove as much of that chrome as possible. And then we went to the wet sanding. So with the wet sanding, we did 320, 400, 600, 800, and 1,000 grit. And the big thing, I've mentioned it before, just make sure you rinse and wipe down whatever you're sanding between each grit. After we did that, then we went ahead and hit it with the Mother's Mag and aluminum polish, and then buffed that off with a ShamWow. And I think it turned out okay. I was expecting it to look a little bit better than it did on the face. I probably could have come back and done some more with it, but yeah. So now we're just installing the handle that we polished in part 9. As soon as I can line that screw up. And there we go. Yeah, better than it was before. Next, we have the Arbor for the blades, and we're just going to do a little bit of light wet sanding here. It's pretty clean, it looks pretty good, but I just want to kind of polish it up with the sandpaper. So we're just doing 320, 400, 600, and 800, and then 1,000. And like I said, very light sanding. We don't really want to change the dimensions of this Arbor in any way, because there are bearings that slide on this, and we want to make sure that we don't mess with those dimensions. But remember to rinse and wipe between each grit of sandpaper. And then we'll call that done. So next we have the rotor for the motor. And this is really dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Those fan blades on the right hand side, they can take a finger in a heartbeat. So I don't recommend you do this unless you know what you're doing and you've done it before. But I'm basically doing the exact same thing, wet sanding again, and we're just wet sanding with 320, 400, 600, 800, and 1000. Rinsing between each grit, and then we rotate it and do the other side. Again, because we've got bearings that ride on this, we do not want to change the dimensions, so we're just doing a light polishing of it with this sandpaper. And once we're done, we can go ahead and remove the rotor. Next, this is the fence guide bar, and it's got these button caps that go on each end of it, and you can see that they are very oxidized. They used to be chrome at one time. So we're going to polish them and the guide bar all at the same time. So for those end caps, we'll dry sand, and then we're going to wet sand, and then we'll wet sand the guide bar itself. Same process as before, same grits as before. And once we get this done on both sides, we're going to come back and polish it with the Mother's Mag and aluminum polish. And it will look a lot better than it did. So that Mother's Mag and aluminum polish is just magic, man. I'm always impressed with how good of a job it does. And that is the guide bar. So all these things that we took down to bare metal and polished up, we're going to come back and we're going to apply a good penetrating oil to it. This is super slick stuff. I like it, and it works great. And then just wipe down that part. And that'll help protect it from corrosion over time. So next we've got the power panel, and this is the switch for the power panel. I'm just going to clean it up with some CRC electrical contact cleaner and a toothbrush, and then remove the old wires from it. And we'll set that aside. So I made up this wiring diagram to help me and to help you guys if you decide you're going to do this. This shows all the connections we're going to be making. You can download it. The link is inside the description of the video below. So I'm going to use liquid nails to adhere that spacer plate that we made to fit inside the power panel and cover up the holes, since the original holes are wider than the holes we're using. And then I played havoc trying to clean up some of that liquid nails. Then we'll install the plug receptacle in the bottom. Just make sure you got it facing the right way. The ground goes on the bottom. And all of these were a real tight fit, which is exactly what I wanted. Also, I think that the liquid nails added some width between that spacer plate and the power panel. So it's really hard to get this thing to snap in. And we're just oozing liquid nails everywhere. Break out the screwdriver to kind of force those metal spring clamps to engage. And that spacer plate wants to ride up, so I'm having to push it down several times here. But I eventually got smart and got some 2x4s to rest this thing on to get it to snap in place. And for as much trouble as it looks like it's giving me here, once it snaps in, it's in there. I think it's in now. So we just need to move that spacer plate down a little. Then once we get the two receptacles in the top, that plate will be nice and wedged in place. So again, the ground goes on the bottom. And I really like these receptacles. They're better than ones I've used in the past. I like that the ground is screwed in the center on the metal clip. And that allows me to reposition that ground a little bit later, rather than it just coming out of the plastic housing like on some of the receptacles I've used in the past. This one was a little bit harder to get in, but we get it. You can see that spacer plate wants to push away from the power panel right now because we're hitting on it, but it'll clear it in a second here. There's actually another design for the power panel. There's like a more linear design that I actually used on my 12-inch 2-wheel bandsaw. But if you've got a tool and you want one of these and it didn't come with one, you can find them on eBay. Every so often they sell for, I don't know, 30, 40 bucks. And then you can do the mod like I'm doing, and it'll be up to current standards and safe to use. So here I'm trying to unscrew that screw that holds the ground in place so that I can rotate that ground like that and then screw it back down. And I'm doing that because of the way I'm going to route all of these wires So we'll go ahead and connect the 3 grounds first. You don't have to really worry about grounding the power panel itself, because with these receptacles, they're screwed onto the metal clips that are already engaging the power panel. So technically this power panel is grounded. So you don't need a separate wire and going to a screw or anything like that, unless you just want to, you know, overdo it. But hey, you do you. So once we've stripped and routed and sized exactly how long we want these grounds to be, we're going to twist them together, and I'm going to use these white butt connectors that you see up in the top left there. I bought a big pack of those off of Amazon, and they're perfect for a terminal connector that terminates. Way better than a wire nut, in my opinion. Then we'll crimp that on there. And it's going nowhere. So we'll dress that up a little bit with some zip ties. Yeah, the first one of these I ever rebuilt, I'm afraid to open it back up because it was just a big rat's nest of wires. I didn't route stuff properly, and I didn't zip tie anything down, and I'm sure it looks atrocious on the inside. I've gotten better. Frank Lee sent me a picture of one that he redid and how he does his, and all the wiring just looked perfect. And I was like, all right, I need to step my game up. So, an electrician I am not. And if you see me pause for a few seconds and just sort of sit there and do nothing, I'm not having a stroke. I'm actually looking at that wiring diagram, trying to figure out which connection I'm going to make next, because I don't want to screw it up and cut the wrong wire the wrong length. Wouldn't be the end of the world. I could get another receptacle for whatever wire that would be, but I don't have any extras right now, and so I'd have to wait, and that would prolong how long this video would take to get out and all that good stuff. So this is going to get a pigtail, and basically we are connecting the power or the black wire from the plug receptacle to the light receptacle, which is on the left as we're looking at it. And then it gets this pigtail with a ring terminal on it, and that's going to go to one of the 4 positions on the switch, because the light gets constant power and the motor only gets power when the switch is in the on position. So just like we did with the grounds, we're using a butt terminal to connect these 3 wires. And we'll use some zip ties to make all that look nice and neat and organized. Next, we're going to route some of the white wires. So the white wire coming off of the light receptacle, we'll go ahead and cut it and prepare it. Then we're going to go ahead and do the same with the white wire coming off of the plug receptacle or the power receptacle. Those two will get connected, and then we'll add a pigtail that will go to the switch. Figure out how long that pigtail needs to be, and then go ahead and cut it, strip it, and add a ring terminal. All right, we can go ahead and start wiring up the switch. So if you have one of these and you disassemble it, if you just follow my wiring diagram, you should be good to hook. It's not really complicated, but I can understand how people can get confused at times, myself included, and that's why I did the diagram. All right, so we've got the two wires coming off of the motor plug receptacle. Got a white one and a black one. The white one is going to go, both of these are going to go to the switch. The white will get a ring terminal. And I ran out of ring terminals, so the black is going to get that, I don't know what you call that, a Y terminal? Spade, maybe? I'm not sure. Anyways. That terminal happens to be non-insulated, so we're going to use a little bit of shrink tube here, heat shrink. And it doesn't really want to fit on there, so we'll wet that a little and get it on there. Then we're going to use the next size up of the heat shrink so that it'll be able to go over the crimped end of that terminal connector. So we'll crimp it and then slide that heat shrink on there, and then, heat shrink. And then heat it up. Keep wanting to say shrink tube. For some weird reason. Anyways, we'll go ahead and connect those two wires where they're supposed to go to the switch. After we do a little cleanup there. Yeah, I try to keep my work area pretty clean and organized, but it really depends on how smoothly whatever I'm working on is going. if I start hitting some snags, some hiccups, the area starts to get pretty cluttered. And then it's just chaos, at which point I usually stop what I'm doing and straighten up everything and then get back to it. And I know people that can have tools all over the damn place and crap everywhere, and they're perfectly fine in that environment. Me, not so much. All right, so now we're just going to go ahead and test all this and make sure it's working like it's supposed to. So I've got the extension cord that I'm going to plug in, and then we're going to use the heat gun as the motor. So we'll plug that into the motor receptacle. And then we'll use a lamp for the lamp. And we'll plug the power to it. Make sure the plug strip we got all this plugged into is switched off. And snap it on there. And then switch that strip on. The light works. The motor or the heat gun is not running, so we're good. And then we'll flip that switch, and the heat gun turns on. And turn it off. We're good to go. So we're ready to go ahead and assemble this sucker. And we're going to do a couple more zip ties real quick to make sure that this wiring is out of the way as much as possible for the two long screws that are going to go through this case. I'm trying to keep as much of the wiring as I can in the center of all this, but nothing can, or not a whole lot of stuff can go under the switch, and you'll see in a minute that when the cover is on, the switch is going to rest directly on top of those two receptacles for the light and the motor. So you can't have anything pushing that switch up, otherwise this is all not going to fit together very well. So Matt Blast on Garage Journal Forum makes all the tags that I use, and I had him reproduce these a while back, and I bought a couple of extras so I'd have some. But if you guys need decals or graphics like this done, he's the guy. Matt Blast on Garage Journal Forum. And that's a damn near flawless reproduction right there. So you'll see me mess with this a good bit. Got to get that switch started in the hole. And it has a kind of a keyway on the bottom side of the switch that matches up with the little key inside the hole that it's sliding into. That way you don't put the switch in upside down. And I've got the bottom pretty well inserted and the sides pretty well inserted, but the top is going to need some help with this paint scraper. We're almost there. I think that paint is adding just a level of thickness that's making it kind of hard for the top to snap over it, but there it goes. All right. So we can go ahead and install those long screws and the mounting bracket. I painted the mounting bracket that leather brown just to have a little bit of contrast. I think one of the wires was getting in the way, but we've worked past that. There we go. Bracket. And then these two, I don't know what you call that kind of a nut. It's like a piece of stamped metal, but that's what they used. And we'll tighten all that down. And then we've got the nut that goes on the switch. We'll tighten it down. That graphic that Matte Blast made me, it's got like a satin clear coat over it that really helps protect it. And then we'll do one final test to make sure everything is running as it should. And that is going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. In the next video, we will be assembling the motor. And looks like it'll take 2, maybe 3 more videos before we finish this project, but I've enjoyed working on it, and I've enjoyed the questions and comments you guys have had. And again, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section. I'll answer them as soon as I can. As always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.